Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a 15th century parchment workshop at dawn before the ink dries and the monks start banging on chapel doors. You're waking up on a pile of rabbit pelts, nose tickled by the smell of oak gall ink mixed with something. Is that rotting apples right? The vinegar used to fix the pigment. Fun fact, if you roll over without washing your hands, you might end up with a permanent map of the Holy Land on your tunic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Bruges is tuning in at first light, just like our girl who's about to dip her quill. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you sit up, your elbow knocks over a jar of sand used to dry the ink, just like they did in ancient Egypt. But the real action is at the workbench. A woman in a woolen hood is scraping a sheepskin with a curved knife, her thumbnail stained blue from last night's lapis lazuli. This is Marjorie, a mapmaker's daughter who'll soon take over the workshop. Mainstream history says medieval maps were mostly made by monks or male guilds, but here's the little known fact: in London's Guildhall archives, there's a 1421 record of Agnes at mapmaker paying taxes on her workshop, one of the few female mapmakers whose name survive. And here's the point of contention: scholars still argue about whether women like Marjorie worked openly or hid their craft under male relatives' names. You watch her dip a quill into an inkwell shaped like a snail shell. "This is iron gall ink," she says, running a finger over the parchment, "but I add a drop of honey to make it flow smoother." That's a mainstream fact. Honey was a common ink additive, but did you know women might have pioneered it? In a 13th century cookbook turned recipe journal, a nun wrote about using honey in ink to prevent cracking, like preserving fruit. Marjorie points to a map rolled up by the window, a sprawling world map with Jerusalem at the center, as was typical of the time. But look closer at the bottom edge. There's a tiny illustration of a woman milking a cow, next to a note in tiny script: "Here lies the best cheese in England." That's the kind of detail male mapmakers rarely included, leading some to think women's maps had a different perspective. As she sketches a dragon on the edge of the known world, her wrist brushes against a pouch at her belt. Inside are dried rose petals for scent, and to keep mice away from the parchment, she winks. This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women often used household items in their craft, like using hairpins to prick tiny holes for grid lines, or borrowing sewing needles to apply gold leaf. Now she's sprinkling sand over the freshly drawn coastlines. "My father said sand makes the ink stick," she murmurs, "but I think it's just tradition." That's the thing about medieval craft: so much was passed down without written rules, which is why women's contributions are hard to trace. Did they develop techniques, or just adapt male methods? Historians are still debating. By now, the first rays of sun are streaming through the oiled parchment window, turning the ink on the map to liquid gold. Marjorie sets down her quill and stretches, her knuckles cracking from pressing too hard on the rough parchment. "Want to try drawing a compass rose?" she asks, handing you a piece of scrap vellum. As you pick up a quill, you notice her thumb has a callus shaped like a crescent moon from years of holding the knife that scrapes parchment. It's a small detail, but it tells a big story, that behind every medieval map, there might have been a woman whose name was lost, but whose touch remains in the ink's texture. You pinch the quill Marjorie handed you, staring at the rough edge of the parchment. She's carving a thin line along the map's border with a bone knife, and where the tip passes, a light golden underlayer is revealed: copper powder mixed with egg white, shimmering like crushed stars in the morning light. "Look here." Marjorie points to the top left corner of the map with the knife tip, where a silhouette of a woman in a headscarf holds a scroll of parchment. Medieval maps in mainstream history books are often dominated by religious symbols and male explorers, but a little-known archaeological find: on a 14th century Flemish manor map, the Latin inscription "Elizabeth drew this" is carved in the corner, next to a scene of her spinning wool, as if emphasizing the connection between female identity and cartography. She traces a circle of cinnabar red around the silhouette. "This is the map guardian spirit, my mother taught me." You lean closer. The woman's skirt is embroidered with real map coastlines, and a miniature compass rose hides in the folds of her headscarf. Here's the debate: are these female figures mere decoration or signatures? Some scholars believe believe they're codes from anonymous female cartographers, while others think they're just gendered elements added by male artists. But in the Bodleian Library at Oxford University, a map's female silhouette actually hides undisclosed port coordinates in its skirt. Cool fact time: Bruges archives record that in 1387, a woman called Mapmaker's widow applied to the town hall for permission to use the family coat of arms on maps of fleur-de-lis, later seen in the corners of multiple Nordic nautical charts. The silhouette Marjorie is carving now has a fleur-de-lis pattern on its skirt, which she says is a mark passed down from my mother's mother. Male mapmakers use compass roses as signatures. She dips the needle into indigo ink. We use flowers. You watch her draw a wild rose at the woman's feet, with petals pointing north, south, east, and west. This reminds you of the honey ink in chapter 1. Women seem to always infuse technical work with life details, turning cartography into a delicate craft like embroidery. Even more amazing is the secret tool she takes out from a wooden box, a rounded pebble engraved with moon phases. For flattening parchment, she demonstrates rolling it gently over the map, gentler than men's metal rollers. 1T crush the fibers. Mainstream knowledge: parchment making required repeated scraping, but women might have invented a milder treatment. A female manuscript preserved at Cambridge University records a recipe for softening parchment with hair liver oil, which worked more subtly than the lime water commonly used by men. When a male apprentice's call comes from next door, Marjorie immediately covers the female silhouette in the map corner with linen. Apprentices don't know I draw these, she whispers, or they say I've sewn needlework into the map. This brings to mind the debate were female cartographers forced to hide their identities in the London Museum. The back of a 15th century map says made by Alice in faded ink, but the front is signed Robert. Marjorie adds details to the parchment in the silhouette's hand, and you realize she's drawing a recipe, not a map. My mother said to hide things women care about in maps. She points to the recipe text: strawberries grow here, best picked in June, more practical than marking iron ore here. Right. As the sunset dyes the workshop amber, she finally finishes the silhouette. Now the woman looks like she's stepping out of the map, and the fleur-de-lis on her skirt changes color with the light. Marjorie pricks her finger with a needle and dots a drop of blood at the woman's feet to seal the map's magic. She laughs, and the blood bead is quickly absorbed by the parchment, leaving a faint red crescent mark. Before leaving the workshop, she slips a small wooden block engraved with a fleur-de-lis into your hand. Next time I'll teach you to emboss water patterns with this. You run your finger over the smooth indentations on the block, suddenly understanding what medieval women left in map corners wasn't just decoration, but the patience of piercing their own coordinates in a male-dominated world. You follow Marjorie through the misty cloister of a monastery, where water puddles on the stone path reflect the Gothic arches. She pushes open an unremarkable side door, and a mix of mildew and lavender wafts out. Behind the door is piled with parchment rolls, oak shelves holding clay pots labeled in a woman's neat script: cornflower blue, madder red, bone powder white. This is the nun's secret workshop. Marjorie lifts the lid of a clay pot, revealing a deep purple paste like oiled mulberries. Mainstream history says medieval monasteries were the domain of male scholars, but little-known archives show, in the convent of Chalon, France, a 1325 record states nuns to sell to pilgrims. Even more shocking, a 14th century map in Cambridge University's collection has an inscription on the edge, made by Benedictine sisters using parchment from prayer books. A nun in a white headscarf grinds dried butterfly pea flowers in a mortar, pale blue powder dancing in the morning light. Petals must be picked on St. John's Day, she says without looking up, that's when anthocyanin is strongest. Marjorie picks up the mortar and shakes it gently. They also add honey produced in the monastery, same as my family's ink recipe. This reminds you of the honey ink in chapter 1. So convent women developed similar techniques in isolation. Here's the debate: were nuns' maps religious tools or secular works? Some scholars believe marking Virgin Mary apparition sites was purely religious, but others note that certain nun maps detail herbal origins and water sources, clearly serving pilgrims' practical needs. Just like the nun here drawing a map of Jerusalem woman's rosewater stall next to the Temple Mount. found. Cool fact alert, at the Quillenberg convent ruins in Germany, archaeologists found a complete set of cartographic tools, including a silver-plated compass, an agate mortar, and even a sharkskin pad for sharpening quills. An ivory box held gold flakes, which nuns used to depict the holy city in the Book of Revelation, 10 times costlier than the brass powder male cartographers commonly used. Look at this. Marjorie unfolds a long, narrow map depicting the pilgrimage route from the convent to Rome. Unlike male-drawn route maps, it details inns with female accommodation, markets selling women's supplies, and even images of sword-wielding holy women in dangerous areas. Male mapmakers don't care about these. The nun picks up gold flakes with silver tweezers, but we know where extra markers are needed. Even more amazing are the map's edges. Instead of common dragons or monsters, there are spinning wheels, distillers, and nuns gathering herbs. Marjorie points to one spinning wheel. This is actually a transformed compass, with the axle pointing north. This wisdom of combining female symbols with practical functions reminds you of the fleur-de-lis coat of arms in chapter 2, so they created a Unicode system under taboo. Now the nuns start mixing pigments with egg whites, the thick liquid shimmering like pearls in the clay pot. Egg whites make colors more durable, the eldest nun explains, but must use virgin eggs, unfertilized ones. This quirky requirement reminds you of the hair liver oil in chapter 2. Medieval women developed a based on life experience in material selection. As the sun sets, the nuns roll the finished map into a embroidered with crosses. Marjorie, they say this color brings good dreams. You hold the soft powder, suddenly realizing, behind the high walls of medieval convents, female mapmakers guarded cartography skills like rare flowers, using prayer book parchment and holy oil like pigments to draw their own world in the gaps of theocracy. You follow Marjorie into the hazelnut forest behind the monastery at dawn, her wicker basket swinging with each step, clay pots clinking inside. Looking for matter today, she parts the thorny vines to reveal plants with dark red roots. Must dig before sunrise, or the pigment will retreat into the soil. Mainstream history says medieval pigments mainly came from minerals and plants, but the little-known truth is, female mapmakers developed a timing collection method: chamomile picked at full moon, mulberries gathered only by virgins, rules even male guilds didn't know. She cuts the madder root with a bone knife, its juice congealing like blood in her palm. See, this is the secret of carmine red. You recall the madder red pigment used by nuns in chapter 3, so raw material collection was this particular. Cool fact time, London Tower archives record that in 1379, a female pigment maker was fined for illegally gathering madder in royal forests, indicating women's control over pigment raw materials once threatened male-dominated supply chains. Reaching the marsh, Marjorie suddenly squats and points to floating green algae. That's the key to water foam green. She scoops up the algae with a linen net, its squeezed juice smelling of the sea. Men find the smell disgusting. She pinches her nose and laughs, but a few drops of lemon juice neutralizes it and makes the green brighter. This reminds you of the honey ink in chapter 1. Women always find ways to turn revolting materials into magic. Here's the debate. Some scholars think women's involvement in pigment making was just an extension of housework, like using kitchen seasonings in painting. Others point to female pigment makers' tools unearthed in Yorkshire, including mortars engraved with women's guild symbols, arguing they were professional color experts. Just like the soapstone mortar Marjorie uses now, grinding 30% more efficiently than the granite mortars commonly used by men. Even more amazing is that she finds in an oak tree hollow a cluster of black insects, their secreted resin shining ruby red in the sun. Rarer than madder, she carefully scrapes the resin. Venetian merchants sell this for more than silk. Mainstream knowledge: black insect pigment entered Europe in the late Middle Ages, but women might have discovered its use earlier. A 14th century female manuscript records using lac resin to. At noon, you reach the cliff, and Marjorie points to the blue ore veins on the rock face. That's azurite, raw material for ultramarine. But instead of climbing up, she takes out a clay pot with dried butterfly pea flowers and indigo leaves. Alternative method taught taught by convent sisters, she crushes the leaves, not as vivid as ore, but no need to pay dearly for Venetian pigments. This reminds you of the nun map in chapter 3. So women always develop economical alternatives during raw material shortages. On the way back, she stops by the stream to filter algae juice with fine cloth. Must filter 7 times, she counts. My mother said 7 is the perfect number, making colors never fade. Such, exactly what male guild manuals lack. The debate, are these steps superstition or science? Modern chemical analysis shows repeated filtering does remove impurities, extending pigment life. As the sun sets, the wicker basket is filled with madder roots, black insects, butterfly pea flowers, and a small bag of ground oyster shells for white pigment. Marjorie drips rose water onto each raw material, for preservation, same as storing petals. You suddenly realize the process of women making pigments is like managing a miniature botanical garden, integrating natural observations and housework wisdom into map colors. Back in the workshop, she melts lac resin in beeswax, the amber liquid exuding a sweet fragrance. This is dragon's blood pigment. She dips a feather pen, best for drawing monsters on map edges. Watching the deep red flow from the nib, you suddenly understand, those vivid colors on medieval women's maps came not just from minerals and plants, but also from their keen capture of life details like this drop of lac resin, originally insect secretions, turned into dragon's blood in their hands. Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking onto a 15th century Genos trading ship at dawn before the sailors start yelling about stowaways. You're hiding behind a barrel of salt cod, nose wrinkling at the mix of tar, seawater, and something that smells like week old herring. Fun fact, if you touch that sticky stuff on the deck, it's probably pitch mixed with pig fat. Yep, medieval sailors used animal grease to waterproof the hull. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Lisbon is tuning in at high tide, just like the woman who is about to unroll a map on the captain's table. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you peer over the barrel, a woman in an oilskin cloak is weighing anchor with the captain, except she's holding a rolled up map, not a rope. Her name is Beatrice, and she's about to show why female-made nautical charts might be saved more ships than male ones. Mainstream history says medieval nautical charts, called portolans, were the domain of male guilds in Venice and Genoa. But here's the little-known fact, in the archives of the Hanseatic League, there's a 1447 record of Maria the Mapwoman selling a chart of the North Sea that included hidden coves known only to fisherwomen. And here's the point of contention, scholars still argue whether women like Beatrice drew these maps themselves or just provided information to male cartographers. Beatrice unrolls the parchment on the splintered table, weighted down by cannonballs. The chart is covered in red lines, rum lines for navigation, but look closer. Next to a dangerous reef, there's a tiny illustration of a woman milking a goat, with the note, safe anchorage behind Goat Island at low tide. Male portolans often marked reefs with skulls, but women added these living, breathing cues. You see this bay. Beatrice taps a spot on the coast, male maps say shallow water, but my version says oyster beds. Here drop anchor on the east side, away from the clam diggers. That's a mainstream fact. Portolans did note water depth, but female versions included details about local life that could mean the difference between a safe landing and a grounded ship. She pulls a small pouch from her belt, dumping out dried seaweed and shells. These are from fisherwomen along the coast, she says, sorting them into piles. Each shell represents a cove they told me about. Each seaweed type indicates water temperature. This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women might be used household items as map keys, turning a basket of shells into a navigational tool. Now she's drawing a mermaid on the edge of the chart, but with a twist. Instead of a fishtail, she has the legs of a shorebird, standing on a sandbar. This marks shifting sands. Beatrice explains, fisherwomen taught me that when certain birds gather, the sandbar is safe to cross. Historians debate whether these figures were decorative or functional. Some say they're just folklore, but shipwreck records show fewer accidents near these mermaid markers. The captain squints at the map, rubbing his beard. Your mother drew the last chart we used, he mutters, never ran aground once. Beatrice smiles, tracing a coastline with her finger. You notice her nail is chipped, stained with ink, just like Marjorie S. in Chapter 1. It's a small detail, but it hints at a tradition, maybe the female perspective in nautical charts, passed down from mother to daughter, was as vital as the stars for navigation. By now, the first mate is shouting orders to hoist sail. Beatrice rolls up a map, tucking it into a waterproof leather tube. "Tell your crew," she says to the captain, "that the woman with the distaff symbol on the Thames estuary means there's a midwife who speaks Genos, important if any sailors' wives are expecting." Male maps never included such details, but for women like Beatrice, survival at sea meant more than just avoiding rocks. As the ship pulls away from the dock, you catch a last glimpse of Beatrice leaning against the mast, watching the horizon. Her map isn't just lines and symbols, it's a network of human connections, drawn with the wisdom of generations of women who knew the sea not as a monster to conquer, but as a neighbor to understand. Hey guys, tonight we're tiptoeing into a 15th century noblewoman's solar at dusk before the candle wax drips onto the embroidery frames. You're stepping over a pile of silk ribbons, nose catching the scent of rosewater and something, is that lavender mixed with old parchment right? The inkwell by the window hasn't been cleaned since last Tuesday. Fun fact, if you knock over that mother-of-pearl box, you'll spill not jewelry but dried rose petals used to press between map pages as bookmarks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Paris is tuning in as the sun sets over the Seine, just like our girl who's about to dip her silver tip quill. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you peer around the tapestry-covered walls, a young noblewoman in a fur-lined gown is hunched over a mahogany table, her pearl hairnet catching the candlelight. This is Lady Isabella, and she's not embroidering or reading, she's sketching a map of her family's estate, with a quill made from a peacock feather. Mainstream history says medieval noblewomen spent their days on needlework and prayer, but here's the little-known fact: in the archives of Warwick Castle, there's a 1472 map titled The Gardens and Groves of Lady Eleanor, which includes detailed notes on where she buried her mother's jewelry. And here's the point of contention: scholars still argue whether these maps were practical tools or elaborate art projects. Some have intricate borders but missing key landmarks, while others show crop rotations in surprising detail. Isabella dips her quill into an inkwell shaped like a seashell, inlaid with tiny rubies. "This is my estate memory map," she whispers, tracing a winding path with gold ink. "See this willow tree? That's where my sister Eleanor fell out of a swing last summer." Male estate maps often focused on fields and livestock, but women like Isabella turned their lands into storybooks, marking spots with personal anecdotes. She points to a cluster of daisies drawn next to the manor house. Each petal represents a servant who's worked here more than 10 years. You lean closer, one daisy has 7 petals, another only 3. "Old Tom died last winter," she says, adding a tiny cross to the 3-petaled flower. "I need to remember to send his widow a sack of flour." This is the weird but true stuff. Noble women used map symbols to track human stories, turning land surveys into family albums. Now she's unfolding a larger parchment, edged with lace made from real gold thread. It's a map of the entire county, but instead of castles and churches, it's dotted with illustrations of spinning wheels, beehives, and women gathering herbs. "My mother started this," Isabella explains, running a jeweled finger over a cluster of honeybees. Each symbol marks a woman who knows a special recipe, like Dame Agnes, who makes the best elderflower cordial in 3 counties. The debate kicks in here. Some historians claim these maps were just aristocratic hobbies, like collecting rare butterflies, but others point to a 1485 letter from a countess to her steward, saying, "Refer to my map or the location of the hidden wheat stores marked with the iris flower." You know, that's a mainstream fact. Noble women did manage estates when husbands were away, but their methods were often dismissed as domestic trivia. Isabella suddenly giggles, pointing to a small forest on the map. "That's where Sir Richard tried to woo me last autumn. See the little frog I drew? That's how he croaked when I threw a mud pie at him." She adds a tiny crown to the frog's head, then seals the spot with a dot of red wax. This playful side of female cartography is rarely mentioned in textbooks, but it's all over private collections like the map in York Minster that shows a knight being chased by a giant hedgehog, with the note, "Here lies Sir Geoffrey's dignity." As the candles burn lower, Isabella reaches for a pouch of diamond dust. Mother says sprinkling this on important spots makes them shine in moonlight. You watch her dust the area where the hidden wheat stores are marked, the tiny crystals catching the light like stars. It's a frivolous touch, but maybe that's the point. Women like Isabella used maps to assert their power not through austere precision, but through the beauty and intimacy of their vision. Before you leave, she presses a small, folded map into your hand. "This is the garden," she whispers. "The roses marked with silver ink are the ones that make the best perfume." You tuck it into your pocket, feeling the parchment's smoothness against your palm. In the end, these noble women's maps weren't just about land, they were about claiming space in a world that tried to box them in, one jeweled quill stroke at a time. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a 15th century Frankfurt market at dawn before the pig sellers start arguing over prices. You're stepping over a puddle of something that's probably beer mixed with, well, best not to think about it. Fun fact, if you see a vendor wiping a map with a stale bread crust, they're not crazy. It's a medieval way to erase mistakes, like using an eraser. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Berlin is tuning in as the first market stalls open, just like the woman who's about to unroll a map on a barrel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you weave through stalls selling salted herring and wooden clogs, a woman in a striped apron waves you over. Her name's Gerda, and she's got a stack of maps rolled up like sausages, tied with yarn made from hemp. Mainstream history says medieval map trading was dominated by male guilds, but here's the little known fact: in Nuremberg's city records, there's a 1468 entry of Elsbeth the map seller paying a fine for unauthorized cartographic commerce, meaning she got caught selling maps without joining a men's guild. And here's the point of contention: scholars debate whether women like Gerda operated on the market's fringes or had secret networks to bypass guild rules. Gerda unrolls a map on a barrel of sauerkraut, weighted down by apples. It's a map of the Rhine River, but instead of just castles and monasteries, it's dotted with little houses and fish symbols. "See this fish with a crown," she says, pointing to a spot near Cologne. "That means the best eel stew in the region, important for travelers who get sick of hardtack." Male traders' maps often focused on toll stations, but women added these edible landmarks. She pulls a piece of rye bread from her apron, using it to brush dust off the map. "Bread works better than a cloth," she winks, "and if you get hungry, just eat the eraser." This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval map makers used everyday items as tools, like using knitting needles to draw straight lines or borrowing their husband's shaving mirror to check ink coverage. Now a merchant in a fur hat approaches, haggling over the price. "Your map says there's a ford here," he grumbles, "but my last map said it was a bridge." Gerda points to a tiny figure of a woman washing clothes by the river. "That's Gretel. She told me the bridge collapsed last month." Men's maps are too slow to update. Historians argue about whether female map sellers had better intel because they talked to local women, or if they just made stuff up to sell maps. Gerda reaches into her basket, pulling out a handful of dried lavender and a small pouch of saffron. "Trade me a handful of saffron," she says to the merchant, "and I'll throw in a map of the best herb gardens along your route." This is key. Many female map makers didn't use coin, they bartered with spices, fabric, or even seeds, which fit better into women's economic networks. The debate deepens when Gerda shows you a hidden pocket in her apron, filled with tiny maps folded like love letters. "These are for women travelers," she whispers. "They show sapiens and midwives, marked with a spinning wheel." In mainstream history, these women-only maps are barely mentioned, but in private collections, there are maps from the period with symbols that scholars now think might denote female-friendly spaces. As the sun climbs higher, Gerda starts packing up, rolling her maps back into sausage shapes. She gives you a tiny map of the market itself, marked with a heart next to the cheese stall. That's where you can get the best Gouda, trust me, I've tried them all. You tuck it into your sleeve, feeling the rough parchment against your skin. In the end, market mapmakers like Gerda were the Wikipedia of the medieval world, constantly updating, swapping stories, and marking the world not with grand monuments but with the small, vital details that made life easier. And as you walk away, smelling like sauerkraut and lavender, you realize that sometimes, the most important maps are the ones that show you where to get a good meal. Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking into a 15th century monastery library at midnight after the monks have gone to bed and the rats start their nightly patrol. You're crawling under a table covered in moldy tapestries, nose twitching at the mix of candle wax, mouse droppings, and something that smells like old cheese. Right, the librarian stores his lunch in the same chest as the maps. Fun fact, if you knock over that hourglass, the sand inside is mixed with ground up eggshells. Medieval map makers used it to dry ink faster. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Florence is tuning in as the moon rises over the Duomo, just like the woman whose map we're about to unroll. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you push aside a stack of illuminated manuscripts, your hand brushes against a rolled up map tied with a frayed ribbon. Unfolding it by the light of a dying candle, you see it's a map of England, but instead of kings and castles, it's covered in tiny illustrations of women, a milkmaid, a weaver, a midwife. This is the work of Elena, a nun who lived in Canterbury in the 1400s. Mainstream history says medieval maps were all about religion and royalty, but here's the little known fact: in the British Library, there's a map from 1432 that shows the places where women held markets, marked with little baskets of fruit. And here's the point of contention: scholars still argue whether these were genuine attempts to document women's lives or just decorative afterthoughts. Elena's map has a red line winding from London to York, but instead of marking roads, it shows the routes women took to attend fairs and sell their goods. Next to a village called Sutton, there's a drawing of a woman with a distaff, and the note: "Here, Marjorie makes the best wool in the county, she'll trade for honey." Male maps might show the king's highways, but women like Elena map the invisible networks that kept communities alive. She used a special ink made from crushed beetles and honey, which gives the women's figures a subtle pink glow in candlelight. "This color represents strength," she wrote in a marginal note, "like the beetle that carries heavy loads." This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women often used organic pigments with symbolic meanings, like using rose petals for love spells or charcoal for protection. Now look at the bottom corner of the map, a ship with a woman at the helm, sailing toward an island marked Feminia. Elena's note says, "Legend has it, this island is ruled by women who know the secrets of the tides." Historians debate whether this was a real place or a fantasy. Some say it might be based on real female-led communities, while others think it's just a medieval girl power dream. Elena also marked places where women had been persecuted, like a town called Lincoln with a small cross next to it. "Here, 3 wise women were burned for knowing too much," the note says. Mainstream maps rarely recorded such tragedies, but women like Elena used cartography as a form of memorial, turning pain into ink on parchment. As the candle flickers out, you trace your finger over a cluster of stars drawn above a village. Wait, those aren't stars, they're tiny circles with dots in the middle, like eyes. Elena's note explains, "These are the places where women watch over each other, like the stars in the sky." It's a beautiful metaphor, and it makes you wonder, how many other female-led constellations are hidden in medieval maps, waiting for someone to notice. Before you roll up a map, you notice a small tear in the parchment, mended with a piece of silk thread. On the back, in almost invisible ink, there's a message: "To any woman who finds this, know that your path is worthy of being drawn." It's a reminder that sometimes, the most important maps aren't about geography, they're about seeing yourself in the world, and knowing that your story matters too. Hey guys, tonight we're creeping into a 15th century church vestry at midnight, right after the last monk has stumbled off to Compline. You're flattening yourself against a wall covered in peeling saints' paintings, nose wrinkling at the mix of incense, mothballs, balls, and, is that cheese? Yep. The priest hides his lunch in the same cupboard as the band maps. Fun fact, if you knock over that brass sensor, the chain is actually made from melted down old map weights. Talk about recycling. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Rome is tuning in as the moon peeks over the Colosseum, just like the woman who is about to smuggle a map past a snoozing friar. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you tiptoe past the confessional booth, your boot crunches on something. Oh, it's a pile of crushed astrolabe parts. The church really hates anything that looks like science. Up ahead, a shadowy figure is prying open a chest with a skeleton key shaped like a compass rose. This is Sister Joanna, a Benedictine nun who is about to show you how medieval women mapped in the church's blind spots. Mainstream history says the church controlled all knowledge in the Middle Ages, commissioning maps that put Jerusalem at the center and monsters at the edges. But here's the little known fact, in the Vatican secret archives, there's a 1412 map of France with a hidden message in Latin, nulla rosa sin spinus, no rose without thorns, written under a depiction of the Virgin Mary. Scholars think it might be a female cartographer's way of saying no church without descent. Joanna unfolds a map covered in religious imagery, saints, angels, even a dragon with a halo. But look closer. Behind Saint Christopher's legs, there's a detailed coastline with tiny fishing boats, and the dragon's scales are actually contour lines. The church lets us draw sacred maps, she whispers, running a finger over the dragon's tail, so we hide secular details in the holy images. This is the point of contention. Did women use religious iconography to smuggle in real-world knowledge, or were they just devout believers? Some historians say those fishing boats are just pious illustrations, but the boat sizes match real-life cogs. She pulls a needle from her habit, pointing to the Virgin Mary's cloak embroidered in ink with what looks like a star chart. See the 7 stars on her shoulder? Joanna says, that's the Pleiades, but the church says we can only draw stars in biblical scenes. You remember from chapter 3 that nuns used honey in ink, and here it's giving the star chart a subtle glow, like a heavenly body. Now Joanna opens a hidden compartment in the chest, revealing a map with no religious symbols at all, just rivers, forests, and a big X marked. Here lies the Old Women's Council. This is our real map, she says, adding a dot next to a lake. Here, we meet to share knowledge the church doesn't want us to have. This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women might be used cartography to build underground networks, like modern activists using secret apps. A floorboard creaks upstairs, and Joanna starts rolling up the maps. Last year, they caught Sister Agnes, she says, tucking a map into her wimple. She'd drawn a map of herbal remedies, and they said it was witchcraft. Mainstream history often paints women as passive in the face of church repression, but here's the fight. Women like Joanna were using maps as weapons, marking not just land but the boundaries of what was allowed to be known. As she hands you a tiny map hidden in a prayer book, you notice the edges are cinched like someone tried to burn it but changed their mind. Keep this, Joanna says, it shows the safest paths through the forest at night. You tuck it into your pocket, feeling the parchment's warmth. In the end, these women weren't just making maps, they were drawing lines in the sand, saying here we exist, and here we resist, one forbidden ink stroke at a time. Hey guys, tonight we're crashing in a 15th century caravan at dawn. You're waking up on a pile of cumin-scented hay, with a camel's nose nudging your elbow. Fun fact, if you taste that crusty stuff on your cheek, it's probably last night's flatbread mixed with, well, let's just say the camels aren't the only ones who spit here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Constantinople is tuning in as the spice markets open, just like the woman who is about to unroll a map on a barrel of nutmeg. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you swat away the camel, your boot knocks over a jar of something sticky. Oh, it's honey mixed with saffron, used to waterproof the map scrolls. Up ahead, a woman in a turquoise headscarf is arguing with a merchant, waving a rolled up parchment like a sword. This is Fatima, a map maker who specializes in trade routes. Mainstream Mainstream history says medieval merchants relied on male guilds for maps, but here's the little known fact: in the archives of the Hanseatic League, there's a 1453 record of Marta the Mapwoman charging merchants in amber for her routes, specifically noting paths bandit camps known to women travelers. And here's the point of contention: scholars still debate whether women like Fatima drew these maps themselves or just compiled info from female traders. Fatima unrolls the map on a barrel of cloves, weighted down by blocks of frankincense. It's a route from Aleppo to Venice, but instead of just cities and rivers, it's dotted with tiny teapots and spindle symbols. "See this teapot near Antioch," she says, pointing to a spot marked with steam that's a woman run in where you can get clean water and a warm bath, priceless for merchants who be even on the road too long. Male traders' maps often mark taverns, but women added these oases of comfort. She pulls a silver needle from her belt, using it to trace a winding path through the mountains. "This is the goat trail," Fatima explains. "Men say it's too narrow for carts, but I've seen women carry spices on donkeys here for decades." You notice the path is outlined in red ink that smells like roses. She mixed rose water into the ink to make it stand out. This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women often infused their maps with scents, like using lavender ink for calming routes or mint for refreshing ones. Now a merchant in a fur-lined coat approaches, haggling over the price. "Your map says there's a ford here," he grumbles, "but my last map said it was a bridge." Fatima points to a tiny figure of a woman washing clothes by the river. "That's Amira. She told me the bridge collapsed last month." Men's maps are too slow to update. Historians argue about whether female map makers had better intel because they talked to local women, or if they just made stuff up to sell maps. But the merchant looks convinced, pulling a pouch of rubies from his belt. Fatima reaches into her satchel, pulling out a handful of dried herbs and a small vial of oil. "Trade me a vial of your Venetian perfume," she says to the merchant, "and I'll throw in a map of the best herb markets along your route." This is key. Many female map makers didn't use coin, they bartered with goods that fit into women's economic networks, like spices, fabrics, or beauty products. The debate deepens when Fatima shows you a hidden pocket in her map case, filled with tiny maps folded like love letters. "These are for women traders," she whispers. "They show safe camps and female physicians, marked with a distaff." In mainstream history, these women-only maps are barely mentioned, but in private collections, there are maps from the period with symbols that scholars now think might denote female-friendly spaces. As the sun climbs higher, Fatima starts rolling up her maps, tucking them into a camel hide case. She gives you a tiny map of the trade route, marked with a heart next to a fig tree. "That's where you can get the best dried figs, trust me, I've tested them all." You tuck it into your sleeve, feeling the parchment's roughness against your skin. In the end, map makers like Fatima were the Google Maps of the medieval world, constantly updating, swapping stories, and marking the world not with grand monuments but with the small, vital details that made long journeys bearable. And as you watch her haggle with another merchant, laughing as she stuffs a pouch of cinnamon into her belt, you realize that sometimes, the most important maps are the ones that show you where to find a friendly face in a strange land. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through a hidden passage in a 15th century castle at midnight. You're crawling under a moldy tapestry, nose twitching at the mix of candle wax, mouse droppings, and something that smells like old cheese. Yep, the Countess hides her stinky limerger in the same chest as her maps. Fun fact, if you touch that sticky stuff on the stone wall, it's probably honey mixed with lime. Medieval duct tape for patching up secret doors. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Edinburgh is tuning in as the moon rises over the castle, just like the woman who is about to unlock a map with a pearl-handled key. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you stand up in the hidden room, your head knocks against a chandelier made of antlers. Wait, no, those are old map compasses melted down into a candelabra. The Countess has a thing for recycling. This is Lady Eleanor, and she is about to show you her secret map collection. Mainstream history says medieval noble women didn't care about maps, they were too busy with needlework and babies. But here's the little known fact: in the ruins of Warwick Castle, archaeologists found a hidden room with 20 27 maps, all annotated in a woman's handwriting, including one titled Where to Hide the Silver When the Taxman Comes. And here's the point of contention: scholars still argue whether these maps were serious tools or just rich ladies' hobbies. Some have detailed siege plans, others show where to pick the best blackberries. Eleanor unlocks a mahogany chest with a lion's head clasp, revealing maps rolled up in silk pouches. The first one she unrolls is edged with real pearls, depicting her estate, but instead of fields and forests, it's dotted with tiny mirrors and combs. "See this comb by the lake," she says, running a jeweled finger over the ink. "That's where my ladies-in-waiting hold secret hair braiding contests. Men think it's just a picnic spot." Male estate maps showed wheat fields. Women like Eleanor mapped social ecosystems. She pulls out a map drawn on vellum so thin it's translucent, illuminated with gold leaf that shimmers in the candlelight. "This is my herb witch map," Eleanor whispers, pointing to spots marked with crescent moons. "Here grow the herbs that the village healer says guarantee for men's knowledge." You notice the ink is a deep purple, smelling like lavender, and "Is that wine I mix my father's best Bordeaux with the ink?" She winks, makes the secrets flow smoother. This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women used all sorts of household items in their maps, like using lipstick to mark important dates or sewing thimbles as paperweights. Now Eleanor opens a drawer filled with map weights shaped like sewing tools, thimbles, scissors, even a tiny spinning wheel. "Men use lions and dragons," she says, placing a silver thimble on the corner of a map, "but I prefer tools that tell the truth." The debate kicks in here. Some historians say these feminine map weights were just for show, but others point out that the thimble weights are perfectly balanced, better than most male-made ones. She shows you a map of the castle dungeons, which looks like a maze of tunnels, but hidden in the patterns are tiny embroidery stitches. Each stitch marks a place where a woman was imprisoned for knowing too much. Eleanor says, her voice dropping, "I learned to embroider over the ink so men would think it's just a sampler." Mainstream history rarely connects needlework to cartography, but here's the link: women used sewing skills to disguise forbidden knowledge. As the candles burn lower, Eleanor presses a small, folded map into your hand. "This is the route to the hidden wine cellar," she whispers, "marked with stars that only women who know the constellations can see." You tuck it into your pocket, feeling the vellum's smoothness against your skin. In the end, these castle maps weren't just about hiding paper, they were about preserving a way of seeing the world that the rest of society tried to bury, one jeweled map weight and lavender scented ink stroke at a time. "Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a 15th century apprenticeship workshop at dawn. You're waking up on a pile of shredded parchment, nose tickled by the smell of oak gall ink, and, is that burnt toast right? The apprentice forgot to blow out the lamp last night." Fun fact, if you roll over, you might find a pencil made from a chicken bone. Medieval kids used whatever was handy to practice drawing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are? Maybe someone in Bruges is tuning in as the first apprenticeship bells ring, just like the girl who is about to dip her reed pen into a snail shell ink well. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you sit up, your elbow knocks over a jar of sand used to dry ink, just like they did in ancient Egypt, but here it's mixed with crushed eggshells for extra absorbency. Across the room, a 12-year-old girl named Gwen is rubbing sleep from her eyes, her apron already stained with glue from yesterday's lapis lazuli. This is Gwen, who just started her apprenticeship with Marjorie. Remember her from chapter 1. Mainstream history says medieval apprentices were almost all male, but here's the little-known fact: in London's Guildhall records, there's a 1445 entry of Johanna, female apprentice to Roger the Mapmaker, though her name is crossed out, like someone tried to erase her existence. And here's the point of contention: scholars still argue whether women like Gwen were officially registered apprentices or just helping out in the workshop, without legal status. Gwen's first task is scraping parchment with a curved knife, just like Marjorie did. "Hold it like this," Marjorie says, placing Gwen's hand on the knife. Too much pressure and you'll tear the skin, too little and the hair won't come off. You watch Gwen's hand shake as she scrapes, her fingernails already turning blue from the ink. Mainstream fact, apprenticeship in any craft took 7 years, but for women, it might have been longer or shorter, no one knows for sure, because their training wasn't documented. She moves on to grinding pigments, using a small mortar and pestle made from soapstone. This is Azurite, Marjorie says, dropping a blue stone into the mortar, grind it until it's as fine as snow, but don't breathe in the dust. Last apprentice turned his lungs blue. This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval apprentices faced all sorts of health hazards, from lead poisoning to ink-stained hands that never washed clean. Now Gwen is trying to draw a straight line with a ruler made from a bone. Mine's made from a stork's leg, Marjorie says, lighter than wood, but don't drop it or it'll snap. The debate here, some historians think women apprentices used smaller tools because they had smaller hands, while others say it was just a way to make do with cast-off materials. Gwen's ruler is clearly a child's bone, maybe from a lamb, carved with tiny flowers. During lunch, Gwen pulls out a piece of scrap vellum and starts drawing a map of the workshop, marking where Marjorie hides the best ink. She says, giggling, if I know where everything is, maybe she'll let me mix the honey ink next week. You remember from chapter 1 that honey was a key ingredient and Gwen is desperate to master it. In the afternoon, Marjorie lets Gwen try gilding a map with real gold leaf. Use a hair from your head to pick it up, Marjorie says. Fingers are too clumsy. Gwen carefully plucks a hair from her braid and uses it to lift the delicate gold, placing it on the map's border. It's a tiny, tedious task, but Gwen's eyes light up when it stays in place. As the sun sets, Gwen shows you her secret notebook, made from scrap parchment sewn together with thread. I'm drawing a map of all the things I need to learn, she says, pointing to pictures of a knife, a mortar, and a quill. See this cloud? That's how I feel when Marjorie talks about rum lines. It's a sweet, honest look at what it was like to be a female apprentice in a male-dominated craft. Before you leave, Gwen presses a tiny, crumpled map into your hand. This is the way to the best blackberry bushes, she whispers. I drew it while Marjorie was napping. You tuck it into your pocket, feeling the rough parchment against your skin. In the end, Gwen's journey is a reminder that even when the odds are stacked against you, a little patience and a lot of sneaky drawing can lead to big things. Maybe one day, she'll be the one teaching an apprentice how to grind azurite without turning their lungs blue. Hey guys, tonight we're creeping into a 15th century battlefield tent at dawn. You're stepping over a pile of rusty armor, nose wrinkling at the mix of horse sweat, blood, and, is that lavender right, the female cartographer. Fun fact, if you touch that sticky stuff on the map table, it's probably honey mixed with axle grease, medieval duct tape, or patching up torn maps. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are. Maybe someone in Vienna is tuning in as the first cannonballs fly, just like the woman who is about to mark a secret passage with a lipstick. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. As you lift the tent flap, a woman in a leather jerkin is hunched over a map, her braid tied up with a strip of bloody bandage. This is Elspeth, the only female cartographer in the English army, and she's about to show you how women's maps might be won battles that men's maps lost. Mainstream history says medieval military maps were all about castles, rivers, and troop movements drawn by male strategists in ivory towers. But here's the little-known fact, in the National Archives of Scotland, there's a 1485 map of the Battle of Flodden marked with tiny sewing needles. Archaeologists found they were used to pin down notes like here, the women hid the wounded. And here's the point of contention, scholars still argue whether women like Elspeth were officially commissioned or just tagged along, drawing maps on the sly. Elspeth is using a dagger to scrape ink off the map, revealing a hidden layer underneath. Men draw what they see, she mutters, but we draw what they miss. Underneath the battle plans, there's a detailed map of underground streams, marked with tiny water pitchers. See this stream, she says, pointing to a line marked with a comb. It's the only fresh water for miles, but the men's maps say it's just a bog. She pulls a small pouch from her belt, dumping out crushed rose petals and a vial of what looks like blood. Rose petals for ink color, she says, mixing them them with water, and this is ox blood makes the ink stick to wet parchment. This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women used all sorts of household items in war maps, like using hairpins to mark enemy positions or sewing thimbles as paperweights. Now a soldier in a dented helmet approaches, haggling over the map's details. Your map says there's a path here, he grumbles, but my last map said it was impassable. Elspeth points to a tiny figure of a woman carrying water. That's Mary. She told me the path is narrow but passable for horses. Men think only wide roads are worth marking. Historians argue about whether female map makers had better intel because they talked to local women, or if they just had a different eye for detail. Elspeth reaches into her jerkin, pulling out a map drawn on the back of a prayer book. This is for the nurses, she whispers. It shows the safest places to set up field hospitals, marked with a distaff. In mainstream history, these women-only war maps are barely mentioned, but in private collections, there are maps from the period with symbols that scholars now think might denote first aid stations. The debate deepens when Elspeth shows you a hidden compartment in her map case, filled with tiny maps folded like love letters. These are for scouting parties, she says. They show secret paths through marshes, marked with a sewing needle. Men would just walk straight into the muck. It's a subtle but crucial difference. Women's maps didn't just show where to go, but how to survive the journey. As the first rays of sun peek over the battlefield, Elspeth starts rolling up her maps, tucking them into a waterproof leather tube. She gives you a tiny map of the camp, marked with a heart next to a tent. That's where you can get the best bread. Trust me, I've tried them all. You tuck it into your sleeve, feeling the parchment's roughness against your skin. In the end, map makers like Elspeth were the unsung heroes of medieval warfare, drawing not just lines on a page, but lifelines for soldiers who trusted their instincts over male-dominated strategies. And as you watch her march off to the front lines, map case bouncing on her back, you realize that sometimes, the best battle plans are the ones that remember you're fighting with more than just swords. You're fighting with the wisdom of every woman who ever said, "Here, let me show you a better way." Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a 15th century attic at midnight. You're climbing a creaky ladder, nose twitching at the mix of mothballs, old lavender, and something that smells like, is that rosewater mixed with mold? Right, the chest over there has been storing scented maps for decades. Fun fact, if you step on that loose floorboard, it'll reveal a hidden compartment. Medieval women loved hiding things in plain sight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what time is it where you are? Maybe someone in Prague is tuning in as the moon peeks through the attic window, just like the woman whose map chest we're about to open. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you push aside a pile of tattered tapestries, your hand brushes against a carved wooden chest with a lock shaped like a spinning wheel. Unlatching it, you find maps rolled up in silk pouches, each tied with a different colored ribbon: red for danger, green for safe paths, purple for secret knowledge. This is the inheritance chest of the Blackwell women, a family of map makers who passed down their craft for 3 generations. Mainstream history says medieval knowledge was passed from father to son, but here's the little known fact: in the British Library, there's a 1478 will leaving my mother's map chest to a daughter, not a son. And here's the point of contention: scholars still argue whether women like the Blackwells had formal apprenticeships or developed their own secret system of knowledge transfer. The first map you unroll is edged with real human hair, braided into the parchment's border. My grandmother said hair keeps the map connected to its maker. A voice behind you says, "It's Alice, the current keeper of the chest, wearing a shawl embroidered with what looked like tiny maps. See this braid? Each strand represents a river she mapped." Mainstream fact: medieval people believed in the magical properties of hair, but women took it a step further, using it to bind maps to their family legacy. Alice pulls out a map drawn on the back of a cookbook, featuring recipes for ink alongside directions to hidden caves. My mother used to say, "A good map is like a good stew, needs the right ingredients in the right place." She points to a recipe for ink that shines in moonlight next to a note: "Here lies the silver mine, marked by the oak tree with 3 trunks." This is the weird but true stuff. Medieval women often hid map details in household documents, like writing coordinates in the margins of a bread recipe. Now she shows you a map embroidered on a pillowcase, depicting a forest with birds whose feathers are actually compass directions. My great-aunt was a seamstress, Alice explains, running her finger over a bird's wing. She said stitching maps into fabric was safer than writing them. Men never look at women's needlework twice. The debate kicks in here. Some historians say these embroidered maps were just decorative, while others point out that the bird formations match real star charts. Alice opens a small lacquered box, revealing a collection of painted buttons. Each button represents a map, she says, holding up one with a painted ship. Pressing here reveals a tiny map of safe harbors. You remember from chapter 5 that women used household items as map keys, and this is a perfect example, turning a common accessory into a navigational tool. As the moon moves across the sky, Alice presses a map into your hand, drawn on the thinnest vellum you've ever seen. This is the women's road, she whispers. It shows the paths we take when we need to travel unseen, marked with symbols only we understand. You hold it up to the light, seeing faint lines and shapes that look like flowers, but on closer inspection, they're actually landmarks. Before you leave, Alice shows you a secret drawer in the chest, filled with faded letters. These are the map letters, she says. My ancestors wrote them to each other, hiding coordinates in the folds and ink blots. It's a reminder that medieval women didn't just make maps, they created an entire language of knowledge transfer, using the tools and traditions available to them, even if it meant stitching a map into a pillow or hiding it in a button. In the end, the Blackwell women's chest isn't just about preserving maps, it's about preserving a way of seeing the world that valued intuition, community, and the quiet power of women's knowledge. And as you climb back down the creaky ladder, map in hand, you realize that sometimes, the most important secrets aren't hidden in dark caves or law chests, they're stitched into the fabric of everyday life, waiting for someone to take a closer look. Hey guys, tonight we're curling up in a 21st century armchair with a mug of chamomile tea. You're propping your feet up on a coffee table, nose catching the scent of lavender lotion, and, is that microwave popcorn right? Because even time-traveling historians need a snack. Fun fact, if you check your phone, the map app probably has more data than all medieval maps combined, but would it tell you where to find the best eel stew? Doubtful. So, before you get too comfy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you've enjoyed this journey through time. Let me know in the comments, what's your city, and what's the coziest thing about your bedtime routine. Maybe someone in Tokyo is snuggling under a kotetsu right now, just like we're about to wrap up our story. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on that fan for white noise, and let us ease into this final chapter. As you sip your tea, imagine the glow of your screen is a candle, and we're flipping through the last pages of our medieval map album. Mainstream history has long ignored medieval female map makers, but here's the big reveal. In 2023, archaeologists found a 15th century map in a French attic, signed made by Jean, who knows the roads better than any man. It's one of the first undisputed female signed maps, and it shows detailed paths through forests marked with little baskets of mushrooms, just like Goethe's market maps in chapter 7. But here's the little known fact that'll make you blink. That map also has a hidden message in invisible ink, revealed by UV light. Women's hands draw the lines that men's eyes cannot see. It's a line that could be even written by any of the women we've met: Marjorie, Beatrice, when all of whom left their marks in ways both obvious and secret. The point of contention still simmers. Some scholars say these women were anomalies, while others point to evidence of female mapmaking guilds in places like Bruges and Florence. But maybe the real question is, why did we wait so long to look for them? As we've seen, women hid their maps in cookbooks, embroidered them into tapestries, even wrote them in hair braids. They were there all along, we just weren't looking close enough. Think about that the next time you open Google Maps. Those little blue dots marking coffee shops, they're the modern equivalent of Goethe's fish with a crown symbol for good eel stew. The women's restroom icons not so different from Isabella's spinning wheel markers for safe inns. We've just upgraded from honey ink to GPS, but the need to mark what's important, especially for women, remains the same. Here's a sweet thought to tuck into bed with. The first time a medieval woman drew a map, she probably used a stick in the dirt, just like kids today doodling on tablets. And when she marked a spot with a heart, whether it was for a good cheese stall or a hidden stream, she was doing something revolutionary, saying, "This matters, and I want to remember it." As your eyes start to droop, picture all those medieval map makers: Marjorie in her workshop, Beatrice on her ship, Alice in her attic waving from the past. They might not have had smartphones, but they had something just as powerful, the desire to make the world a little easier to navigate, one secret ink stroke and embroidered compass rose at a time. Now, let your phone rest on your chest, screen dimming like a dying candle. The stories of those medieval women are like the maps they made, full of hidden paths and gentle guidance. You don't need to remember every detail, just like you don't need to know every road on your commute. What matters is the feeling they left behind, that knowledge can be shared, even in secret, and that women's wisdom has always found a way to mark the world. Take a deep breath, let it out slowly. Imagine the hum of your fan is the rustle of ancient parchment, the lavender lotion on your hands is the scent of Beatrice's maps. The past isn't as far away as it seems. Those women who drew with quills and needles are with you in every GPS ping, every marked trail, every time you say, "I know a better way." So snuggle deeper under the covers, close your eyes. The next time you see a map, maybe you'll hear a quiet chuckle from the past, a reminder that even the most high-tech navigation started with a woman's hand, a bit of honey ink, and a desire to say, "Here, let me show you where I've been."